It began with a phone call that no one inside the royal household expected to hear. Within minutes, corridors fell silent. Private secretaries abandoned scheduled meetings, and senior aides rushed behind closed doors. Then came the moment that stunned everyone watching from the outside. King Charles reportedly collapsed after learning of a final decision tied to Balmoral, the beloved Scottish sanctuary that has shaped royal history for generations. What could possibly have carried enough weight to shake the king himself? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the reports sounded almost impossible to believe. For decades, King Charles had weathered political storms, family scandals, relentless media scrutiny, and deeply personal challenges. He had endured public criticism and private heartbreak while carrying the enormous burden of preparing for the throne and later protecting it. Yet according to whispers emerging from royal circles, it was a message connected to Balmoral that delivered one of the most devastating emotional blows of his reign. The urgency surrounding the communication immediately raised questions. Senior aides reportedly altered schedules without explanation. Meetings that had been carefully arranged for weeks were quietly postponed. Officials who normally projected calm confidence suddenly found themselves avoiding questions, offering only vague assurances that everything remained under control. But those reassurances did little to stop speculation from spreading. The atmosphere inside royal circles reportedly shifted almost overnight. Sources claimed that an unusual level of secrecy surrounded the matter, far beyond what would normally accompany routine estate discussions. Even experienced palace observers began noticing signs that something significant was unfolding behind closed doors. The silence itself became a story. The fewer answers that emerged, the louder the questions became. What decision had been made? Who had made it? And why did it appear to carry such extraordinary consequences for the king? Part of the reason the story exploded so quickly was because Balmoral is not simply another royal property. For King Charles, it represents something far deeper. It is woven into the emotional fabric of his life. It is a place tied to childhood memories, family traditions, and some of the monarchy's most defining moments. More importantly, it remained inseparably connected to the memory of Queen Elizabeth II. Those who followed the royal family closely understood that any decision involving Balmoral would inevitably touch sensitive questions of legacy, inheritance, and the future direction of the crown. As reports continued to emerge, insiders allegedly suggested that the news reaching Charles was not merely administrative. It was personal, deeply personal. Some claimed the decision challenged expectations that had existed for years. Others hinted that long-standing assumptions regarding Balmoral's future had suddenly been overturned. No official confirmation arrived, but the growing volume of speculation painted a troubling picture. The king was reportedly confronted with a reality he had neither expected nor prepared for. If true, the consequences extended far beyond a single estate. They reached into the heart of how royal history would be preserved and who would ultimately shape that future. Meanwhile, confusion spread among those closest to the institution. Courtiers reportedly exchanged nervous conversations. Advisors scrambled to understand the implications. Observers who had spent years studying royal affairs sensed that this was not a temporary controversy destined to disappear after a few news cycles. Something much larger seemed to be emerging. Every new rumor added another layer of mystery. Every unanswered question intensified the suspense. And at the center of it all stood Balmoral, a place whose importance could not be measured by land, buildings, or wealth alone. What made the situation even more remarkable was the timing. With the monarchy already navigating a period of uncertainty, the emergence of such a dramatic development threatened to reopen old debates about duty, succession, and the preservation of royal traditions. The deeper people looked into the story, the clearer it became that this was not simply about a decision made in the present. It was connected to decades of history, generations of royal stewardship, and promises that may have been made long ago. Those hidden connections would soon reveal why emotions were running so high and why the reaction inside royal circles appeared so unprecedented. But to understand why this decision carried such devastating consequences, we first have to understand what Balmoral truly represents to the House of Windsor. Long before it became the center of a royal crisis, Balmoral was something far greater than a country estate. It was a sanctuary, a refuge, and for many members of the royal family, the only place where the crown felt distant and family felt real. That truth is what made the reports surrounding King Charles so unsettling. The story was never simply about land, inheritance, or administrative decisions. It was about a place that had become woven into the very identity of the monarchy itself. To understand why the alleged final decision hit Charles with such force, it is necessary to travel back through generations of royal history to a time when Balmoral first became more than a residence and evolved into a symbol of continuity, belonging, and tradition. The story began during the reign of Queen Victoria, who reportedly fell in love with the Scottish Highlands and embraced Balmoral as a personal escape from the pressures of public life. What started as a retreat eventually became one of the most treasured locations connected to the crown. Generation after generation returned there not because duty demanded it, but because it offered something increasingly rare within royal life: privacy, familiarity, and a sense of normalcy. While palaces in London represented ceremony and responsibility, Balmoral represented family. It became the place where memories were made away from official engagements, where relationships were strengthened, and where some of the monarchy's most personal moments quietly unfolded beyond public view. For Queen Elizabeth II, Balmoral held an especially sacred place in her heart. Throughout decades of historic change, constitutional challenges, and personal triumphs and hardships, the estate remained her sanctuary. Those closest to royal affairs often described it as the location where she felt most at peace. It was where tradition seemed strongest, where the connection between past and present remained unbroken. The late Queen's affection for Balmoral became inseparable from the estate itself, transforming it into a powerful symbol of stability during an era marked by constant change. King Charles inherited that emotional connection long before he inherited the throne. His bond with the Scottish Highlands stretched back to childhood. Balmoral was not simply a destination he visited. It was a place that helped shape his understanding of family, duty, and heritage. Over the years, he developed a deep appreciation for the landscape, traditions, and values associated with the estate. While the public often saw Charles as a future monarch preparing for immense responsibility, Balmoral reportedly represented a different side of his life, one rooted in personal reflection and family history. That connection only deepened as the years passed. Yet as time moved forward, a difficult reality slowly emerged. Every generation eventually faces questions about stewardship. How should treasured institutions be protected? Who should guide them into the future? And how can tradition survive in a rapidly changing world? Within royal circles, discussions about Balmoral's future reportedly surfaced long before the current controversy emerged. Those conversations were not necessarily driven by conflict at first. Instead, they reflected growing concerns about preservation, responsibility, and ensuring that future generations would inherit the estate in a way that honored its history. But inheritance is rarely a simple matter when legacy is involved. The deeper these discussions became, the more complicated the questions appeared. Balmoral was not just property. It represented continuity between monarchs. It connected Queen Victoria to Queen Elizabeth II, and Queen Elizabeth II to King Charles. Decisions involving its future carried emotional weight far beyond legal paperwork or administrative planning. Every possibility seemed to raise new concerns. Every proposed solution appeared to create new uncertainties. As whispers surrounding future control and stewardship gradually intensified, some insiders reportedly began sensing that competing visions were emerging behind closed doors. What one person viewed as preservation, another might view as change. What one generation considered necessary, another might see as a departure from tradition. Those differences remained largely hidden from public view, but according to growing reports, they never fully disappeared. Instead, they quietly expanded beneath its surface, gathering momentum with each passing year. And that is precisely what makes the events surrounding Charles so significant. Because by the time that urgent communication reportedly reached the king, the questions surrounding Balmoral had already been developing for far longer than most people realized. The estate stood at the intersection of memory, duty, legacy, and succession. What appeared on the surface to be a single decision may actually have represented the culmination of years of private debate, conflicting expectations, and unresolved concerns. The peaceful image Balmoral projected to the world concealed a far more complicated reality, one that was now threatening to emerge into full view. Yet, behind the estate's peaceful image, powerful debates had reportedly been unfolding for years, and they were about to reach a breaking point. For months, rumors swirled through royal circles. Most were dismissed, some were denied, but according to reports, one extraordinary decision had quietly been moving toward completion, hidden from public view until the final moment. As whispers surrounding Balmoral continued to grow, a pattern slowly began to emerge. What had once seemed like isolated conversations about preservation and stewardship now appeared to be connected to something much larger. Palace observers who initially treated the speculation with caution found themselves revisiting earlier reports, searching for clues that may have been overlooked. The more they examined the situation, the clearer it became that important discussions had allegedly been taking place behind closed doors for far longer than anyone publicly acknowledged. According to insiders, senior advisors had reportedly spent months reviewing long-term plans concerning Balmoral's future. These were not routine administrative conversations. They touched on questions that strike at the very heart of royal continuity. Who would ultimately guide the estate through future generations? How could its traditions be protected without preventing necessary evolution? And perhaps most importantly, how could the values associated with Balmoral survive in a monarchy facing constant pressure to adapt? Those questions reportedly fueled a series of private meetings that remained hidden from public view. Yet agreement was far from guaranteed. Sources suggested that differing visions gradually began to surface among those connected to the discussions. Some allegedly favored a more traditional approach, emphasizing continuity and strict preservation. Others reportedly believed that future stewardship required adjustments designed to ensure long-term sustainability. What began as thoughtful debate slowly evolved into a more complicated struggle over competing ideas. No public disputes emerged, but beneath the surface, tensions reportedly continued to build. At the center of many conversations stood the enduring influence of Queen Elizabeth. Even after her passing, her legacy remained impossible to separate from Balmoral itself. According to persistent reports, references to her wishes frequently surfaced during discussions about the estate's future. Those references carried enormous weight. The late Queen was not merely a former monarch in these conversations. She was viewed as a guardian of traditions that stretched across generations. Any claim regarding her preferences immediately changed the direction of debate, adding emotional and symbolic significance to every proposal under consideration. Then came the development that reportedly altered everything. According to royal insiders, key documents, recommendations, or previously overlooked guidance allegedly resurfaced during the review process. The precise nature of those materials remains unclear, which has only fueled further speculation. Some reports suggested they contained important insight into long-term planning. Others hinted that they clarified expectations regarding future stewardship. Whatever their contents may have been, insiders consistently described their reappearance as a turning point that transformed private discussions into something far more consequential. As these developments unfolded, those following the story noticed a growing sense of urgency. The pace of conversations reportedly accelerated. Meetings became more frequent. Senior figures who had previously remained on the sidelines allegedly became directly involved. The atmosphere surrounding Balmoral appeared to shift from careful deliberation toward impending resolution. It was as though a decision that had been years in the making was suddenly approaching its final stage. What made the situation particularly dramatic was the growing belief that not everyone welcomed the direction events were taking. Reports suggested that certain assumptions regarding Balmoral's future were being challenged. Expectations that once seemed secure no longer appeared guaranteed. The possibility of significant change created uncertainty, and uncertainty often breeds anxiety. Within royal circles, the stakes felt enormous because the outcome would not simply influence an estate. It would shape part of the monarchy's living legacy. Then, according to those familiar with the matter, the waiting finally ended. After months of quiet debate, conflicting opinions, and tense review, a final decision reportedly emerged. The details remain heavily disputed, but one element appears consistently throughout the reports. The decision was allegedly presented to King Charles as something largely settled, leaving little opportunity for meaningful negotiation. For a monarch whose personal connection to Balmoral stretched back a lifetime, that reality carried profound emotional weight. Every question that had lingered in the shadows now seemed ready to surface. Every private conversation appeared to be leading towards a single defining moment. And as the implications of the decision became impossible to ignore, attention shifted toward one person above all others. Because sooner or later, the king would have to hear exactly what had been decided, and what it could mean for everything he believed Balmoral represented. And when the details finally reached the king, the reaction was said to be immediate, emotional, and deeply alarming. Those closest to the palace describe a moment unlike any other. The king had faced public criticism, family divisions, and serious health challenges. Yet insiders suggest this news struck a far deeper nerve than anyone anticipated. For weeks, speculation had been building behind closed doors. Questions surrounding Balmoral's future had grown louder. Private discussions had reportedly become more intense, and senior figures had spent months weighing decisions that carried enormous historical and emotional consequences. Yet nothing compared to the moment when the final outcome was allegedly placed before King Charles himself. According to accounts emerging from royal circles, the confirmation arrived during a private briefing that few outside the institution even knew was taking place. It was meant to provide clarity. Instead, it reportedly unleashed a wave of shock that rippled through the highest levels of the monarchy. Those familiar with the situation claim that Charles listened as the details were presented and immediately understood the significance of what he was hearing. This was not a routine update about estate management or financial planning. It was something far more personal. Balmoral had occupied a unique place in his life for decades. It was tied to family memories, private milestones, and perhaps most importantly, the enduring legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. Any decision capable of altering that legacy was bound to carry emotional weight. But according to reports, the reality confronting Charles went beyond disappointment. It challenged assumptions he had reportedly carried for years. Insiders allege that the king had long believed certain outcomes regarding Balmoral were inevitable. Whether those expectations were based on tradition, previous understandings, or personal conviction remains unclear. What is clear, according to those close to the story, is that the final decision apparently disrupted those expectations in a profound way. The certainty that had guided years of thinking was suddenly replaced by uncertainty. The future Charles believed he understood no longer seemed guaranteed. As news of his reaction quietly spread through royal circles, concern reportedly grew among those closest to him. Sources claim the king appeared visibly distressed following the briefing. That detail immediately captured attention, because Charles is known for maintaining composure even during difficult moments. Over decades of public life, he had learned to navigate crises while presenting calm determination. Yet insiders suggest this situation was different. The emotional impact reportedly became impossible to conceal. That concern was magnified by the king's ongoing health challenges. Those around him were already aware of the pressures he carried daily. The responsibilities of the crown had not diminished despite personal difficulties. If anything, they had intensified. As a result, aides allegedly became increasingly worried about both his physical and emotional well-being. The possibility that such a deeply personal matter could arrive during an already demanding period only heightened fears behind palace walls. Soon afterward, according to reports, senior members of the royal family were informed. The conversations that followed were said to be tense and urgent. While official silence remained firmly in place, insiders described an atmosphere unlike anything they had witnessed in years. Questions multiplied, reactions varied. Some reportedly focused on the emotional impact on Charles, while others immediately began considering the broader implications. If the decision carried the significance many believed it did, then its consequences would extend far beyond one individual. At the same time, palace staff reportedly moved swiftly to contain growing uncertainty. Schedules were reviewed, communications became more controlled. Discussions that had once remained confined to a small circle now demanded wider attention. Every effort appeared focused on maintaining stability, while the institution processed the implications of what had occurred. Yet despite those efforts, the sense of unease continued to spread. Because beneath the immediate concern for the king lay an even larger realization. This was no longer simply about Charles's personal reaction. The deeper people examined the decision, the more they began to understand that its effects could reach into the future of the monarchy itself. What initially appeared to be a private matter was rapidly evolving into something much bigger, something capable of influencing how royal legacy, stewardship, and succession would be viewed for years to come. And as that realization took hold, attention gradually shifted beyond the king toward the family members who would inevitably be affected by whatever came next. But the shockwaves were not limited to the king alone, because others within the family soon realized the decision could reshape the monarchy's future. As word spread through royal circles, attention shifted from the king's reaction to a much larger question. Who would ultimately shape the future of Balmoral and the legacy attached to it? The concern surrounding Charles had not disappeared. If anything, it had intensified. Yet as palace insiders continued discussing the reported decision, another realization slowly began to dominate conversations behind closed doors. The issue was no longer limited to the king's personal disappointment or emotional response. The focus was expanding toward the future itself. If Balmoral was entering a new chapter, who would be responsible for writing it? That question carried enormous significance because Balmoral has never been viewed as merely an estate. It is a symbol, a living connection between generations, a bridge linking the monarchy's past to its future. And whenever symbols are involved, disagreements become far more emotional than practical. According to reports, different generations within royal circles had gradually developed different visions for how that future should look. Some reportedly believed the estate's greatest strength lay in preserving traditions exactly as they had been passed down. They viewed Balmoral as a sacred inheritance that should remain largely untouched by changing times. Others allegedly argued that preserving a legacy sometimes requires adaptation rather than resistance. Their concern was not abandoning history, but ensuring that history remained relevant for future generations. What appeared on the surface to be a discussion about stewardship was increasingly becoming a debate about identity itself. That tension between tradition and modernization reportedly created difficult conversations. Neither side viewed itself as opposing Balmoral's legacy. In fact, both claimed to be protecting it. Yet they approached the challenge from fundamentally different perspectives. One side looked backward for guidance, the other looked forward. And somewhere between those competing visions stood the future of one of the monarchy's most treasured symbols. As these debates intensified, increasing attention reportedly turned toward Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Over recent years, their influence within the institution has steadily grown. They are widely viewed as central figures in the monarchy's future. And according to palace observers, their perspectives inevitably carried weight whenever discussions involved long-term planning. Reports suggest that both William and Catherine have become increasingly focused on balancing continuity with public trust, ensuring that royal traditions remain meaningful, while preparing the institution for future generations. That growing influence naturally fueled speculation. Some wondered whether the reported decision reflected a broader shift in thinking within the monarchy. Others questioned whether newer voices were beginning to shape outcomes that had previously been guided by older assumptions. No clear answers emerged, yet the very existence of those questions demonstrated how significant the situation had become. Balmoral was no longer simply a historic estate under discussion. It had become a focal point for larger conversations about leadership succession and the direction of the crown itself. Throughout all of this, the memory of Queen Elizabeth II remained impossible to ignore. Nearly every reported conversation surrounding Balmoral eventually returned to her legacy. Palace insiders allegedly described repeated concerns about preserving the values she embodied throughout her reign: stability, duty, continuity, service. Those principles become deeply intertwined with Balmoral's identity. As a result, many feared that any decision perceived as departing from those values could trigger consequences extending far beyond the estate's boundaries. That fear created an atmosphere of extraordinary tension, because symbols matter. Within the monarchy, they often matter as much as official titles or constitutional responsibilities. Balmoral represents permanence in an institution constantly navigating change. If its future appeared uncertain, some worried that the uncertainty could spread into broader questions about royal continuity. What began as a discussion about stewardship suddenly carried implications for how future generations might understand the monarchy itself. According to reports, difficult conversations continued unfolding behind closed doors as family members, advisors, and senior figures attempted to navigate these competing concerns. Every perspective carried emotional weight. Every proposed solution created new questions. And with each passing day, it became increasingly clear that the controversy surrounding Balmoral was revealing deeper divisions than anyone initially realized. Because the more attention investigators gave to the story, the more evidence seemed to emerge that this conflict had not appeared overnight. The reported decision may have triggered public interest, but the forces driving it appeared far older. Hidden beneath years of tradition, expectation, and private debate were tensions that had been quietly growing in the shadows, waiting for the moment they could no longer remain concealed. Yet the deeper investigators looked, the more they uncovered signs that this controversy had been building for much longer than anyone realized. At the center of the entire controversy stood one absent figure whose influence still shapes every corner of royal life: Queen Elizabeth II. And according to persistent reports, her final vision for Balmoral may have determined everything. As investigators continued digging into the growing controversy, one name kept resurfacing again and again. Not King Charles, not Prince William, not any advisor, courtier, or palace official. The name that repeatedly emerged was Queen Elizabeth II. Though she was no longer present to explain her intentions, her influence appeared to remain deeply woven into every discussion surrounding Balmoral. The further the story unfolded, the more many began to suspect that the reported decision which had shocked the king may have been rooted in principles established long before the current crisis ever began. That possibility carried enormous significance because few figures in modern history shaped the monarchy more profoundly than Elizabeth. For 70 years, she served as the institution's anchor through triumphs, scandals, celebrations, and periods of uncertainty. Her leadership was built upon a simple but powerful belief. The crown must endure beyond any individual. Personal preferences could matter, but duty always came first. According to many royal observers, that philosophy influenced every major decision she made throughout her reign. It also explains why reports regarding her alleged wishes for Balmoral have attracted so much attention. For Elizabeth, Balmoral was never simply a retreat from official responsibilities. It occupied a unique place within her personal world. It represented continuity in an ever-changing life. There, generations of royals gathered away from public expectations. Traditions were preserved. Relationships were strengthened. Family history was not discussed as something distant and abstract, but lived and experienced through shared memories. Because of that connection, many insiders reportedly believe that the late queen viewed Balmoral as something that required special protection. According to persistent claims circulating within royal circles, discussions concerning the estate often included references to private guidance, long-term planning, and broader questions about succession and stewardship. None of these reports have been officially confirmed, yet they continue to fuel speculation because they align with what many already understood about Elizabeth's priorities. She spent decades safeguarding institutions she believed should outlast her own reign. It would hardly surprise observers if Balmoral occupied an important place within that vision. What makes the story particularly intriguing is the suggestion that certain recommendations, understandings, or preferences connected to the late queen may have resurfaced during the review process. If true, that possibility changes the entire narrative. Suddenly, the reported decision was not merely the result of contemporary debates between competing viewpoints. Instead, it may have reflected guidance originating from a monarch whose influence continues to shape decisions even after her passing. Such a scenario would explain why emotions reportedly ran so high. It would also help explain why some individuals appeared prepared to accept outcomes they may not have personally favored. Because within the monarchy, legacy carries extraordinary power. A decision associated with Queen Elizabeth II is not easily challenged. Her reputation for duty and long-term thinking continues to command immense respect. If her preferences pointed toward a particular course of action, many would inevitably view that guidance as carrying special authority. Under those circumstances, competing interests could suddenly find themselves overshadowed by a much larger obligation, preserving the vision of the monarch who dedicated her life to protecting the institution. That possibility reportedly fueled difficult conversations behind palace walls. Some insiders allegedly questioned how best to honor Elizabeth's legacy while still addressing the realities of a changing world. Others argued that safeguarding royal heritage required unwavering commitment to the principles she championed throughout her reign. The tension between those viewpoints only deepened the mystery surrounding Balmoral. Every new revelation seemed to raise even more questions. Yet despite the uncertainty, one theme remained constant. Again and again, the discussion returned to duty, not personal ambition, not convenience, not individual preference. Duty, the same principle that defined Elizabeth's reign, appeared to hover over every aspect of the controversy. And if reports regarding her final vision were accurate, then the decision that reportedly devastated Charles may never have been intended to satisfy anyone's personal wishes at all. Instead, it may have been designed to protect something larger than any single member of the family. That realization transformed the entire controversy. What initially appeared to be a dispute over stewardship suddenly took on a much deeper meaning. The questions were no longer limited to Balmoral's future. They now touched the very foundation of how the monarchy understands responsibility, inheritance, and continuity across generations. And as more pieces of the puzzle emerged, the true significance of the reported decision became increasingly difficult to ignore. If those reports were true, then the decision was never really about property. It was about duty, inheritance, and the future direction of the crown. By the time the public began hearing whispers of the controversy, the consequences were already unfolding behind palace walls. Meetings multiplied, strategies shifted, and questions nobody wanted to answer suddenly demanded attention. What had once been a private matter discussed among a limited circle of advisors was now becoming impossible to contain. Rumors surrounding Balmoral's future were no longer confined to discreet conversations within royal residences. They had begun leaking outward, reaching journalists, commentators, and longtime royal observers, eager to understand what had triggered such extraordinary concern at the highest levels of the monarchy. The public still lacked clear answers, but one thing was becoming increasingly obvious. Something significant had happened, and the institution was working tirelessly to manage the fallout. According to reports, senior aides found themselves facing a difficult challenge. On one side stood growing public curiosity. On the other stood the monarchy's traditional commitment to privacy regarding sensitive family matters. Balancing those competing pressures became increasingly complicated as speculation intensified. Every attempt to calm concern seemed to generate new questions. Every effort to maintain silence appeared to fuel even more curiosity. The result was a growing atmosphere of uncertainty that spread far beyond palace walls. As whispers multiplied, media attention reportedly intensified as well. Commentators began revisiting earlier reports, searching for clues hidden within previous developments. Questions about Balmoral's future suddenly became the focus of widespread discussion. What exactly had been decided? Why had the decision reportedly affected King Charles so deeply? And perhaps most importantly, what did it reveal about the monarchy's future direction? The lack of definitive answers only amplified public fascination. Inside the institution, however, fascination quickly gave way to concern. Sources suggest that senior officials worked relentlessly to maintain stability while navigating an increasingly complicated situation. The monarchy had weathered countless storms throughout its history, but each crisis brings unique challenges. This one arrived during a particularly sensitive period. King Charles was already carrying significant responsibilities while managing ongoing, personal pressures. The emergence of another major controversy reportedly added yet another burden to an already demanding reality. That pressure was not limited to Charles alone. According to insiders, family members began quietly reassessing their positions as the implications of the reported decision became clearer. Individuals who may have once viewed the matter as a routine discussion allegedly started recognizing its broader significance. Conversations reportedly serious. Assumptions were questioned. Expectations were reevaluated. The further the story developed, the more people appeared to understand that the consequences extended beyond Balmoral itself. What made the situation especially challenging was the symbolic nature of the controversy. Balmoral occupies a unique place within royal history. Any debate involving its future inevitably touches larger questions about continuity, stewardship, and legacy. Because of that, even relatively small decisions can carry enormous emotional weight. Insiders reportedly worried that disagreements over such an important symbol could create the appearance of division at a time when unity was desperately needed. That concern transformed the issue into yet another test for the monarchy. Throughout its history, the institution has survived not because it avoided conflict, but because it ultimately found ways to adapt while preserving its core identity. The challenge facing the royal household now appeared remarkably similar. Could differing viewpoints be reconciled without damaging the traditions people believed they were protecting? Could the family navigate uncertainty while maintaining public confidence? And could the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II continue serving as a unifying force rather than a source of disagreement? Those questions lingered over every reported meeting, every private conversation, and every attempt to manage growing speculation. The deeper the controversy spread, the more difficult it became to separate personal emotions from institutional responsibilities. Yet despite the uncertainty, the monarchy continued moving forward, determined to project stability even as important questions remained unresolved. And perhaps that is what made the situation so compelling. Beneath the speculation, beneath the rumors, and beneath the emotional reactions lay a mystery that had still not been fully answered. The public had heard fragments of the story. Palace insiders had reportedly witnessed its consequences. But one critical piece remained missing. The deeper observers looked, the more they realized that understanding the future required answering a single question about the past. But even amid uncertainty, One final question remained unanswered, and it may ultimately define how history remembers this entire episode. In the end, this story was never simply about a castle in Scotland. It was about legacy, about the weight of history, and about a monarch who reportedly found himself confronting a decision that reached beyond his own lifetime. After weeks of speculation, whispered conversations, and mounting uncertainty, the controversy surrounding Balmoral ultimately revealed something much deeper than a disagreement over an estate. At its heart stood a question that every monarchy must eventually face. How do you honor the past while preparing for the future? It is a question that has challenged kings and queens for centuries, and according to reports, it is the same question that now sits at the center of this extraordinary story. The alleged decision that reportedly shook King Charles was significant not because of financial value or administrative consequences, but because it touched something far more powerful. It touched legacy. For Charles, Balmoral has never been just a place marked on a map. It has been part of the emotional foundation of his life. Long before he became king, the estate represented continuity in a world defined by responsibility and expectation. It was connected to childhood memories, family traditions, and moments shared with loved ones far away from public scrutiny. Through triumphs and disappointments, through decades of preparation for the throne and the challenges that followed, Balmoral remained a constant presence. That is why reports of his reaction resonated so strongly. People understood that this was not merely about property. It was about something deeply personal being placed in the context of something profoundly historic. Yet even as attention focused on Charles, the influence of Queen Elizabeth II continued to loom over every aspect of the controversy. Throughout this entire story, her presence seemed impossible to escape. Her values, her sense of duty, her commitment to preserving the institution she spent a lifetime serving. Whether the reports regarding her final wishes prove accurate or not, one reality remains undeniable. The late Queen's legacy continues shaping decisions long after her reign ended. Her belief that the monarchy exists to serve something greater than any individual remains one of the most powerful forces guiding the institution today. That belief lies at the center of why Balmoral matters so much. The estate has become a symbol of continuity across generations. It represents the idea that some traditions are worth protecting not because they belong to one person, but because they connect the past, present, and future. Every generation inherits those responsibilities. Every generation must decide how to carry them forward. And every generation faces the challenge of balancing personal desires against obligations that extend far beyond themselves. Perhaps that is what future historians will focus on when they look back on this chapter. They may not remember every rumor, every headline, or every detail of the controversy. Instead, they may remember the larger lesson hidden beneath the speculation. They may see this as another moment when the monarchy was forced to confront difficult questions about identity, stewardship, and change. A moment when competing visions of the future collided with the enduring weight of tradition. Because the modern monarchy exists in a world very different from the one Queen Victoria inherited, or Queen Elizabeth II governed. Expectations evolve, public attitudes shift, new challenges emerge, yet the institution continues to rely upon values that have survived for generations: duty, service, continuity. Those principles often require sacrifices. They require individuals to place the crown above personal preference. And according to many observers, that enduring struggle between personal wishes and institutional responsibility is what this story has truly been about from the beginning. As the controversy unfolded, it exposed the emotional cost of those responsibilities. It highlighted the tension between family and institution, between memory and progress, between what people hope for and what history sometimes demands. Those tensions are not unique to Balmoral. They are woven into the very fabric of royal life. They explain why seemingly private decisions can carry such extraordinary significance, and why the consequences often extend far beyond the individuals directly involved. In the end, the mystery surrounding Balmoral may never be fully understood by the public. Some questions will likely remain unanswered. Some conversations will remain private. Some details may never emerge at all. But perhaps the lasting importance of this story does not depend on uncovering every hidden fact. Perhaps its significance lies in reminding us that behind every royal decision stands a larger battle over legacy, responsibility, and the future of an institution that has endured for centuries. And as the winds continue to sweep across Balmoral's hills, one truth remains impossible to ignore. The decisions made today will echo through the royal family for generations to come. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.